Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Osha Rose. I'm the Adult Programming Coordinator here at the Rockport Public Library. I'm so happy you're all here. I'm excited to introduce Dr. Michael Deneen, who has helped bring his friend and colleague here to speak with us. Dr. Michael Deneen, if you didn't know, it's a fun fact for me. He's a teacher of English at Endicott College, and he's been there for 13 years. He founded the Gloucester Area Astronomy Club 20 years ago. They meet on the second Friday of every month at the Lanesville Community Center in Gloucester, and they have about 300 members right now, but about 30 or so will show up to the meetings. So you're welcome to join. And Dr. Mario Motta was one of the first members. So they have known each other now for almost 2 decades. And as Dr. Motta said, not sure if he wants Michael introducing him because he knows me too well, but I am going to let him do the honors. So welcome, Dr. Michael Deneen and Dr. Mario Motta.
Hi, folks. That's me. I'm Michael Deneen. I'm here just to introduce Mario. What I'm going to do real quick is just tick through. I've got 8 little bullet points, just the stuff that would be in bold on his CV, just to make sure you know who he is and what he's done. It's pretty amazing life. So here we go. We'll just run through them. He went to medical school at Tufts University. 8 years on the AMA Council on Science and Public Health, Vice Chair of the Massachusetts AMA Delegation, President of the Massachusetts Medical Society, and served on the Board of Trustees of the AMA for 4 years, Chair of the Maine Medical Society Committee on Legislation. He was intimately involved with Massachusetts healthcare reform, and you may remember not too long ago, the state had the lowest rate of uninsured residents in the United States. Thank you, Mario. His work led to outdoor lighting with the possibility of being AMA compliant. I want you to think about that for a minute. Lighting that is AMA compliant, not traffic department compliant, not electrical department compliant, not this kind of safety organization compliant, not like your tires on your car. Light that is medically okay. Okay, so that's been part of our world for a while now. People need to pay a little bit more attention to. So AMA compliant lighting is what we're pushing here. But Mario will get into that. He's board certified in cardiology and nuclear cardiology, was director of cardiology research for his practice, and is or was clinical at Tufts. Still is. That's terrific. In 2013, he won't tell you this, but he's just tickled pink about it. And you feel free to ask him questions about it later. The International Astronomical Union has named an asteroid in his honor. Asteroid 133537 Mario Motta, which is pretty good. So he's not only this very accomplished cardiology, great practiced maneuverer of legal systems and governmental process, but also a pretty astonishing astronomer. So come on up, Mario. I give you Mario Motta.
All right. Thank you. That was quite an introduction. I'm happy to be here. Can you hear me okay? All right, fine. So what I'm going to talk about is kind of an overview of the issue of light pollution. And I'm not going to get into light fixtures because there's only an hour's worth of time. So I'd like to basically give you the reasons why we should be controlling light pollution. And the things that always come up are specifically safety, crime. People worry about that for lights. What I also want to talk about is vision, okay? How many people here, I see a number of people that have gray hair like me. How many people have trouble driving at night? There you go, practically the entire audience. It's not your fault, it's bad engineering, And I'm going to show that to you because this is a fixable problem in cities and states that do the right thing, like Tucson, Arizona. You can drive down the street without having to wear sunglasses at night. Other places like Houston, I actually know people who wear basically a modified sunglass so they can travel at night because the lights are so bad. So, and then I want to talk about melatonin suppression and how that leads to some medical illnesses, which is the main reason why the AMA came out against severe light pollution. So let's get into it. You already were told all this. So, light pollution affects human health. When I get into the human health part, I'll show you studies. I'm not going to read off what's on the slide. I'm specifically giving you a sampling of scientific papers because I want you to understand this is not opinion. It's not just wishes. This is actual scientific data that shows this is the right thing to do for human health reasons. So glare causes dangerous conditions. Light pollution, multiple studies now, no effect or actually increases rates of crime when you have bad light pollution. It interferes with circadian rhythms. It suppresses melatonin. That inhibits the immune system. And I'll say this again. It's not that light causes cancer. It's the suppression of melatonin in your body at night when you're supposed to be sleeping that creates the problem. I'll show you why. And that leads to endocrine-related carcinomas, sleep, mood, depression, obesity, and diabetes increase. And then there are coronary events because of that. So, what happened? Okay. It's no secret that because I'm an amateur astronomer, when I first got involved with light pollution way back in the early 80s, it had nothing to do with medicine. It was because I like building telescopes and I like using telescopes. And people who have bright lights around the house and ruins the sky for me annoyed me. So eventually moved to Gloucester, and the sky is better, but there's slowly creep coming out even to that area. So I built this scope. It's a 32-inch f6 telescope. According to Sky Telescopes, the largest completely homemade telescope. Everything was handmade, including the optics. And I enjoy using it. But along the way, by the way, this is an image of a galaxy. This is NGC 891 taken through that telescope. Along the way, I met Dr. Richard Stevens. He's an epidemiologist, he died 2 years ago, unfortunately, but he was an epidemiologist at the University of Connecticut. And he's the one who first made the connection. That's what epidemiologists do. They make connections for medical illnesses as the possible causes. So this guy was brilliant. I got to know him very well, but I was at a meeting once where I met him. We started talking, and that led to a nice 30-year relationship. And he got me interested in to look deeper into this. And because I was involved with research at the time, I became very interested in the research aspects of light pollution. So this is what Richard Stevens did. He looked at the amazing rise in breast cancer in the world in the early 90s. I mean, it was like doubling every year. And everyone assumed back then that it had to be toxins in the water, air pollution, something wrong with the food, and they kept searching for this. He looked at a whole bunch of different factors, and then finally it just dawned on him when he broke out the countries in order of breast cancer rates that it matched exactly the degree of light pollution in every country. China, which back then had some of the worst pollution in the world. I mean, they use nothing but coal and a whole bunch of other things. So they have bad air pollution. They have bad water pollution. They're not so strict on human safety standards. Had the world's lowest rate of breast cancer. The U.S., which has all these rules in place to protect us from bad toxins, had the world's highest. He said, it can't be the toxins. And then it dawned on him that this matched exactly the level of light pollution. And I don't know what finally clicked in that on him, but that's what he looked. Now, here's a world map stitched together from satellites, and you can see where all the light pollution is. Basically, the industrialized West and areas of the world where there is no light pollution, like much of South America and Africa. And guess what? Their rates of breast cancer are still way, way down. Here's locally. If you notice, Rockport and Gloucester is kind of like a little spot of sanity in this map. And it's not perfectly dark here, but it's a lot better than the Boston suburbs. So here's the issue. This is a blue LED. The person who invented this eventually won a Nobel Prize. And the reason is because they use this to get a white LED. If anyone in this room can invent a white LED, I guarantee you'll be a multi-billionaire overnight. No one has invented one yet. So what they do is they take a blue LED, which has high energy, it's blue. They put coatings on the LED that absorb the blue and then re-radiate it into warmer colors like reds and oranges and yellows. That's the only way to do it currently with current technology. And depending on the degree or how well it's manufactured, you either get lots of blue leaking through or not so much blue leaking through, and that's the main difference. So 5,000K LEDs are extreme blue. They have about 40% blue, as opposed to amber LEDs, which do exist, and you can make lights out of those, that have no blue. We're kind of in the middle there. It's kind of I should explain what a 5,000K LED was. This is left over from the 18th century. Back then, they developed a scale. If you take a hot iron and put it in a cold stove, and it eventually heats up, it'll turn dull red, gets hotter, it'll turn a little bit orangey, gets hotter. Eventually, if you can heat the piece of metal hot enough, it turns white, right? That's called the Kelvin scale for determining the color of that. And for some bizarre reason, the lighting companies adopted that for when they measure lights. So even though LEDs have no heat whatsoever associated with them, a reddish LED is a Kelvin of like 1,500 or 2,000. A really blue LED is 5,000 Kelvin. It's not has anything to do with heat, but we're kind of stuck with that system right now. Just so you know, I mean, now here is, if you saw any one of these lights individually, they'd all look white to you. Only when they're side by side do you notice there's a difference. So you notice the 2,700K is still white. It's just not as intensely blue white as 6,000K, right? You can see that. So, I mean, after you look at a bunch of these, you can start determining what, I can drive through a city, I know what color lights they have because I've been doing this for so long. Cities started off with 4,000K. Some cars still use 6,000K because they're being granted self-rule, that they're not regulated by the Department of Transportation. And those are the street lights and cars you go like this every time you pass them. 3,000K has become the standard. That's what the AMA recommended, started in 2016 for street lights. Nowadays, if I was writing that today, it would be 2,700K or lower. Let's find out why. First of all, color. You know, remember the high-pressure sodium lights that were kind of pinkish? Okay. We did fine with those, and that's what the red line is, 1870 Kelvin, and those were high-pressure sodium. Nowadays, the lighting companies trying to make you believe that you got to be able to tell chartreuse from blue from orange a mile down the road, and they keep wanting to sell these high blue LEDs so you can tell color better. It's really nonsense. The 2,500K is the black line, and 5,000K is the blue line up top. It's essentially indistinguishable on testing for telling blue down the road. So, and in fact, here's a local shopping center I took a picture of, and that's 3,000K, and everyone can see the leaves are green, the ground, bark mulch is brown, building's yellow. Color is not an issue, really. But because the Chinese took LEDs and started manufacturing them in mass quantities, a lot of the lighting companies simply bought tons and tons and tons of 4,000K LEDs because those were the first ones being manufactured. They essentially had very little phosphorus coating. And some cities were early adopters because they wanted to save money. There's nothing wrong with going LEDs. You save money and you use less, you waste less energy. So that's fine. That's not the problem. So Queens, New York put up 4,000K LEDs. It shined into people's bedrooms, and as people say, it looks like a prison atmosphere. You don't it doesn't sound like much going from 4,000 to 3,000K lights. I mean, the average person says, so what? What's the difference? Once you live next to one of those lights, you really want to blow it up and move. They're horrible. They're bad on your eyes. They hurt your eyes. They keep you up at night. And so the lighting company's response to, I know in one city said, put up light blocking shades. I gave a talk in that town. I said, why should you have to spend money on light blocking shades when they're the problem, right? Put up the right kind of lights. Anyways, because of all the complaints, New York took them all down and they put up 3,000K. And that happened all over the country. So Davis, California, upper left, they put up 4,000K lights. There was such a hue and cry about it that they finally called a town meeting, and they said, well, if you want lower lights, we have to change them all, and that's going to cost money, so you have to vote for a tax increase. The tax increase passed that meeting. That's how much people hate 4,000. They're willing to increase their taxes to get rid of bad lights. When you have to live next to them, you'll understand. Monterey sued their own city council because they didn't listen to the proper advice. And this is happening all over the country. So since then, this is just a partial list, but a number of cities have demanded 3,000K or lower. Toronto, right after I passed the AMA lighting suggestions, Toronto read it and adopted it and said, the IES was saying you need to be IES compliant. They're the Illuminating Engineering Society. And Toronto said, no, we're going to go with the AMA recommendations. So the IES is livid over this. Seattle and Pittsburgh put up 4,000K in around 2010, 2012. They're taking them all down because of city population demand and putting up 3,000K or lower. So what I tell people now is don't let your city make this mistake because you're going to have to pay for it twice. Put up the right lights at the beginning, and you only have to do this once because these things last 20, 25 years. Then there are a number of states that have passed light pollution laws. Some are good, some are not so good. We still don't have one in Massachusetts, even though we were one of the people that started the trend. And again, this is 3,000K lighting. It's perfectly fine. So what's the problem? Remember I said you take a blue LED and you put a coating on it. If it's, wish I had a pointer. If it's the red line, I'm sorry, not the red line. If you look at the yellow line, that's 5,000K, and the blue line, 4,000K, you notice, can you hear me? Yeah. This is what you want. This allows you to see. This is just the blue light leakage. Okay? If you notice, 4,000, 5,000K, you got huge spikes of blue that shine through. Whereas if you get 2,700, you don't have that much of a blue spike. So why do we want to eliminate the blue spike? It turns out the specific wavelength of 479 nanometers, which is in the middle of the blue, if you block that, you eliminate all the bad damage medical health effects of melatonin suppression. It's a very narrow band, not even the entire blue that has to be blocked. It's 10 nanometers on either side. So then they say, well, what's the problem? It's the same as the moon. 4,000 K is the same as the moon. This blue line is an actual spectrum of the moon. The red is 2,200 K and the black is 4,000 K LED. This is the light you want. That's why engineers will keep saying it's the same. Stop complaining. My response to that is, you see this spike in the moon? 4,000 K, and you don't see it in the 2,200 K. That's the problem. What's that? Oh, okay. Oh, this is M81. It's one of my favorite galaxies. I'll show an occasional picture. All right. So let's talk about why lights are bad for driving. We're all born with pretty clear eyes unless you have a genetic defect. The lens, as you get older, eventually starts creating microcalcifications in the center of the lens. And eventually those coalesce, in some people, into a cataract. And that's an actual picture of a cataract. What? Okay, thanks. Now I won't get exercise. But, all right, as long as you got this, I'll use it. So, light comes in and focuses on your fovea, and you see an image. It's got to go through the cornea, which can get damaged for other reasons, but the lens is what eventually starts to calcify, and that's the problem. Here is the problem. The lens of the human eye kind of grows like an onion as you get older. And when you're in your 40s, enough layers have been deposited on the outside. This is a problem. I mean, we weren't meant to live to 100, actually. So in your 40s, your body starts to make some changes. The layers are such that normally the lens get all its nutrients from the aqueous humor. It just diffuses in, and the metabolites diffuse out, and then you goes out your kidney like everything else. But when it gets thick enough, the center doesn't get enough oxygen and nutrients. And that happens between age 40 and 50. And because of that, some cells in the center of the cornea die. And when they die, they calcify. And that's the beginning of the trouble. So that's what microcalcifications are, basically dead lens cells in the very center. And if enough of them coalesce, you get a cataract. When you're young, and by the way, when you have that blocking your view, you get scatter in your eye. So when you're young, it takes quite a bit of light to cause disability glare. That's why you had no problem when you were 20. When you're 60 years old, it takes 1/3 as much light to cause a problem and affect your vision. In the Netherlands, a pathologist did a study where he took human cadaver eyes and studied them by shining different wavelengths of light through them. Now, this is a log scale, so it's actually, the difference here is by much greater difference than what it appears on this log scale. But blue scatters the most, red scatters the least. We all know that for the when the sun's setting, right? Why is the sun turn red when it's near the horizon? It's because the blue and the yellows have all scattered, and the only thing penetrates is the red. The same thing happens with a human eye. The physics is the same. There's quite a bit of difference, though, in human sensitivity on anything. I mean, one drug may work well on you and not so well on someone else, or it takes a different dose. We're individuals, we're not a population. And by studying thousands of people, he knows that this was kind of the span. Some people are low sensitivity and some are high sensitivity. That's why at age 50 with the same level of eye problems, you may be able to drive for a few more years than your neighbor can with the same problem. And if you're young and healthy and you get a bright light shine in your eye, you see this, you can still see. If you're my age, this is what you see, right? That's why you're having trouble driving at night. Doesn't have to be that way. If you have an unshielded light, dirty windshield, you see this. If you have a shielded light, that's what you see. More light is not better light. More light is sometimes a bad light. And I'll give a couple of local examples, and I'll get on to some other medical effects. This is St. Anne's Church in Gloucester. Anyone know what that is? When I first moved to Gloucester in 2004, Mayor Bell back then appointed me to a committee. Somehow they were thinking of changing lights, and he heard that I had been working on this, so he pointed me. I said, sure. So I asked for a list of all the street corners where there were the highest number of accidents, and this was number one. They had the most accidents in Gloucester of any place in Gloucester, this intersection. And you'd say, why? Notice the street lights? Now, these back in the days of high-pressure sodium with no shielding. There's a street light here. It's not lit up. Anyone know why? This security light on the St. Anne's School shines into the street, and it basically, the sensor on that light is saying it's always daytime. It never turns on. So the only light that lights up the intersection never turns on, and if you're approaching it, you get completely blinded by this light. They had an average of 10 to 20 accidents here per year. I pointed that out to the city council, and everyone kind of did this. So they convinced St. Anne to take that light down, and lo and behold, within a year, the accident rate dropped to practically nothing. Okay, and they did that all over the city. And I convinced the city to use fully shielded lights with low LED CCT. Whoops. Okay, so you can do this experiment yourself. If you have one of those wall packs, or a neighbor has a wall pack, stand just in the shadows. Don't move. Just put your hand in front, and you'll be able to see better. Okay? This is so self-obvious, but most people don't realize it. Shielding helps you see better in the dark. You're blinded by the light, you can't see. And so you want, good light has to be on the ground. The whole purpose of light is to have a photon strike me, go to your eye so you can see me. That's the purpose of a light. If it goes directly from that light into your eye, it doesn't help you see at all. It constricts your pupil, okay? And by doing that, you see less well in the darker areas, and you're not seeing anything around you because that is blinding your eye. That's glare. Here's another good example from, I gave a talk in Sherbrooke, Quebec. And they used, this was a great example, so I borrowed it from them. So like US, they have these rules in Canada. You have to have a light at every on-ramp and off-ramp. So they have this light here. Look right there. See the person? That woman stepped forward 3 feet. That's it. Okay, so if you're driving around along the highway at about 40, 50 miles an hour, there could be a bear, a moose, a person, a car parked right there. You'd never see it until you hit it. If you had proper shielding, you'd be able to see better. Salem did the same thing. I practiced in Salem, so I got a lot of pictures of bad lighting in Salem. They put up these lights because they want the whale look, right? Whale lights. Whale lights are great when it's one candle power. They're not so great when they're 50,000 candle power. So here it is at night. They shine on the buildings, and the roads are dark. Worst possible design. Whoever is the engineer on this should go back to school. Gloucester did the same thing. They got a grant because they wanted to light up Main Street with the whale look, and they put up these kind of lights. They actually got money for this. So here are rental units here, shining directly into the bedroom. The street is unlit. And this is what it looked like with the those lights. Bad lighting on the street where you need the light, very bad lighting shining into the buildings. We don't have to make that mistake. When we finally did the conversion, we did 19 watt LEDs. They're fully shielded, and that's what we use in Gloucester. It should be 15 because they're replacing 60 watt high pressure sodium, and it's a 4-to-1 conversion. So 15 watt would be the right one, but this is the only ones the lowest one they made. But many cities make that mistake. You know, the lighting company will say, you want LEDs? Sure. We'll take off your 60-watt high-pressure sodium. We'll give you 50-watt LEDs. Now you have the same as if you put up 200-watt lighting, and that's why so many conversions look awful. They put the wrong wattage. And if the city council doesn't know any better, one, they're not saving that much money now, and two, they're making the streets infinitely worse. Here's a street before conversion. Here's one after. Where would you like to walk? And the IES, they're the ones who set the standards for roads. Study from one of their own researchers. This one here is 3,500. This is high pressure sodium. And here's, I think it was, that's 6,000? Yeah, 6,000 K. You actually see better when you have the warmer color. Their own research shows that. So let's talk about road safety for just a moment here. There's no evidence of an association between reduced lighting and nighttime collisions across England and Wales. Why am I using it? England has done numerous studies on this. They're way ahead of us. They've done study after study. I'm not going to show you all of them, but the point is there's not one study that shows that by increase in lighting you get safer streets. But surveys are, public is in favor because we grew up that way. I'll give you a little tidbit. Way back in the 50s, I don't know if no one's probably here old enough to remember this, but before World War II, we had no street lights. Do you know why we started putting up street lights around 1950? Anyone have a guess? Back then, what was the energy source? Coal. Everyone used coal to generate electricity. How do you shut off a coal furnace at night? You can't. And then it takes days to start it up. It takes many days to shut it down. So the electric companies had a problem. They generate all this electricity. They have to have a sink in order to get rid of the electricity. They were just putting rods in the ground, getting rid of it, because they can't shut off the damn furnace. So they went to cities and basically said, we'll give you free electricity if you put up lights. It'll actually help us. Now everyone's grown up with lights and think that's the way it has to be. Go to New Hampshire, where they're very cheap but very practical, and hardly any of the streets there have lights because they don't want to pay for it. And guess who has the worst accidents? Massachusetts and New Hampshire. It's Massachusetts. Brighter streetlights cause more accidents. This is a Journal of Epidemiology, Community Health, and brighter streetlights don't prevent accidents. In fact, they may do more harm than good. No evidence is found that brighter lights help. I'm going to go through quickly some of these, so I don't want to have this go too long. But reduced street lighting on casualties and crime in England and Wales. Little evidence that there's harmful effect of switching off lights on road collisions or crime. 14 years of data show less lights is actually better. Okay, so, sorry, wrong way. Oh, here we go. So, road and traffic collisions didn't make much difference, but if anything, it leans toward switching them off. Part-time light's probably the best thing to do. It's called adaptive lighting. It's a sensor. And many parts of Europe are doing that. You drive along a road, senses a car coming, that's when the light turns on. Crime. I've been giving talks now for 30 years on this, and the lighting companies would always say, well, everyone needs lights for safety. Everyone just assumes that's correct, right? So I've been asking for 30 years, if you have one study that shows putting up lights cuts down crime, give it to me. I've yet to see one. And in 30 years of asking, no one's ever given me such a study because they don't exist. Now, by study, I don't want lighting company glossies, which are basically fake news. I want an actual scientifically peer-reviewed paper, the only thing I'll use. And they're all show the exact opposite. So here's one in Los Angeles. For every 0.1 increase in LED intensity, there was a 1%, 1% increase in the intensity of LED corresponds to a 0.1% increase in property crime rates. That was actually a very well done study in 2018. Chicago Alley Lighting Project. This is Chicago got this, had crime problem in the alleyways. Ever been to Chicago? They have lots of alleyways. So they got a grant to light up all the alleyways. 2/3 of the way through, they ran out of money. So they had 2/3 of the city was lit up, 1/3 was not. So I'm trying to think, yeah, I'm sorry. It's University of Chicago, I thought I had it listed here. Crime unit decided that this would be a perfect study to finally prove lighting is good. So they did this project, and they basically followed it for several years and see what the crime rate was. Much to their chagrin, wherever the lights went up, the crime rate went up. Wherever the lights were not changed, the crime rate stayed the same. So like I said, street lighting may enable rather than hinder street crime. Here's another one, 2022, Journal of Quantitative Criminology. So I'll say it again. If anyone ever sees a study that says this lighting helped this city reduce crime, I'd love to see it, because no lighting company has been able to give that to me so far. And you know, there are other studies I'm not going to put up here because it's just not enough time, but you go ask they've done these studies, ask criminals in jail, why did you break into house A rather than house B? And they'll say, house A had all these floodlights and lit up inside like a Christmas tree. And they basically, it's like a neon sign saying, I have a lot of expensive stuff. I'm afraid of you. Please don't rob me. The house that's dark, they don't want to go to, because if they shine a light there, they're going to get noticed. So they kind of avoid the dark houses. They go to where it's obvious there's expensive stuff. And there's about 4 or 5 studies that have showed that. If you want to, why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is. Why do you break into houses that are lit up? Because that's where the expensive stuff is. And then there's energy waste. We waste $3 billion a year in light that goes up, which does anyone any good. This is the Trifid Nebula. It's 3 brand new stars in the center. Okay, so let's talk about the circadian clock and clock control genes. You have a hormone that's produced in the pineal gland that regulates a lot of your body hormones, specifically thyroid, pancreas, and a number of other things. And it's controlled by about special genes that are regulated by what we call the clock mechanism, the inner clock. That's why when you fly to a different time zone, you feel out of sorts for a while. Your inner clock is off. And it turns out about 10% of all your genes in your body, of all the thousands upon thousands of genes you have, are controlled by this. So if you screw up 10% of your genes, don't be surprised if there's going to be some health consequences. All right? So, yeah. Around 2000, when was it? 2006, it was discovered that there is a special cell in the eye that has nothing to do with vision. It's called the IPRGC cell, and it's a light receptor cell, just like the rods, cones in your eye. What you see goes back to the back of the brain, called your occiput, which is where your vision is, and your brain turns that into a signal that you recognize as vision. However, these cells don't go there. They go to the pineal gland, and the only purpose of that cell is to suppress melatonin, and that also stimulates what's called the limbic system, which basically wakes you up. And you can think of how we would evolve that way. If you lived in a cave and it's dark, and all of a sudden the sun rises and you see blue in the sky, it's time to wake up. So the limbic system acts up, the melatonin goes down, and suddenly you're awake. That's how we evolved over thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Only in the last 100 years with electric lights has this been disrupted, and we can't adapt that quickly. So that's and the problem is that melatonin is an immune adjunct, and I'll explain what that means in a moment. And that receptor only reacts to that 479 nanometers. So the number of studies has exploded in recent years. In fact, I didn't do this search, but someone did. In just 2008 to 2022, if you do a PubMed search of circadian rhythm, light, and cancer, there are now 10,000 studies just in that time span, okay? All saying the same thing. When you have 1 or 2 studies, you have to take it with a little grain of salt. When you have 10,000, it's time to admit this is scientifically valid. In fact, if you want to do your own research, here's an easy way to do it. International Dark Sky, if you go on their website, they have 5,000 articles which you can read and download yourself. These are all scientifically peer-reviewed papers, not press clippings. So faced with that, I was elected to be on the Council of Science and Public Health at the AMA way back in 2008. And light pollution was one of my issues, so I got them to adopt this policy. The AMA has delegates which vote on things, and this was unanimously approved. Basically, for light pollution should have reduced glare, and that is all light should be shielded. That didn't raise a fuss. Lighting companies didn't listen to it, but didn't raise a fuss. It's just common sense. 2012, got them to study the issue of light pollution, and I got these researchers to chime in. Richard Stevens, George Brainerd, David Blast, these some of the top researchers in the world on this issue. And we ended up with a paper that had 134 peer-reviewed references. It basically said we need to continue studying this, and it's a human health issue that needs to be regulated. Again, the lighting, it's just a bunch of doctors talking, so why do we have to listen to them? I'd managed to get a paper in Cancer. This is the first paper in the journal Cancer published that mentioned light pollution and development of human cancers. 2016 came around. If you remember back then, it's 8 years ago, the lighting companies were all going around the country. All the major cities said, we'll cut your energy use by a quarter if you switch to LEDs, and we have them all ready. Because of that, and we knew because of the previous work, this is going to cause major health issues, we came out with a report, and you can download this paper, let me go to the next slide. We came out with a report. We said should be 3,000 or lower. Why did we pick 3,000? That was the lowest one that was made at the time. Nowadays, it would be 2,400 or 2,700. But that's why we put or lower. No one ever pays attention to that, thinking for the future. And it says all lighting should be properly shielded and 3,000 K or lower. This got the lighting companies' attention. They sent threatening letters to the AMA. I kid you not. I kept some of them in my files, and basically saying, you're basically a bunch of doctors. You don't know what you're talking about. We're the experts. Stay in your lane. We've heard that with assault rifles. We've heard every time we say you shouldn't be selling those. We've heard that with oil companies, with air pollution. Every time we give a health advisory, the industry's reaction is always, you're doctors, you don't know what you're talking about. So we published that, and Chicago, where the AMA is based, was about to change all their lights, 275,000 lights, a $1.1 billion project. And someone gave them our paper, and they said, well, let's look into this ourselves. So they actually went around to multiple universities, said, is this real? They finally did their own research and came back and said, AMA is correct. So they went to Siemens, who was about to do the project. They didn't quite sign on the dotted line yet. They have it all drafted up. It says, we want 3,000 K. Siemens didn't have any 3,000 K. They only bought 4,000 K from China. So they lost the contract. That is why if you mention my name and any Siemens, you will get a long series of swear words. They lost the $1.1 billion project because of this one report. And then they put out a public notice, and many cities started adopting it. IES fought us tooth and nail for years. The most recent, and I don't know why it says RP 818 because it's actually, that was published in 2022. The more recent one, they've did a complete 180. Okay, the IES now says we were right all, they don't say we were right all along, their guidelines now mimic what the AMA said 10 years ago. Took them 10 years, but that's okay, they're finally on board. But in many cities, if they hire a lighting engineer, sometimes they'll bring up an old copy. This is, well, I got it right here that we can use 4000K. Okay, so if that happens to you, ask that lighting engineer, what issue are you using? It's got to be the most recent issue. Okay, it's a scientific fact now. The Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2017 went to Hall, Robash, and Young for the discovery of how melatonin works. Here is their mechanism. I'm not going to go through this with you. I just want you to know it's very well known now and very well studied, and the Nobel Prize Committee at least thinks it's important to give them a Nobel Prize. And the World Health Organization also listed light pollution as a Group 2A carcinogen for humans. Oops. That's M51. That's just to keep reminding you why I really want to control light pollution. So the breast cancer epidemic. 1970, there were 68,000 new cases of breast cancer per year. In 2014, 232,670 breast cancers per year. Okay? Now, correcting for population increase, that's still a 4.25-fold increase in new cases. And it's been going up by 4% every year since then. We're close to, I think, 270,000 breast cancers per year now. So why? Why is that happening? Turns out the exposure to artificial light at night is associated with a number of disorders. And in this particular study, it was a compilation. They studied other papers and basically came to the conclusion that increase in cancer, metabolic disorders, and mood disorders is related to light pollution in the street shining in, and also your use inside. So if you, Richard Stevens, way back in the 1990s said, if I'm right, shift workers would be higher risk, blind women would be at lower risk, including twins, lighted bedrooms at night increase risk, and long sleep lowers risk. Every one of these has been proven true by hundreds of papers now. So he was right on the money way back in 1990. And I don't know how you do a study like this, but they did a worldwide search for twin women, one of which is blind and one of which isn't. So they grew up in the same household and same towns, one of them blind, one not. In the United States, for that group, if you can see, you have a 1.7 increased relative risk of breast cancer compared to your sister. Sweden, it was 1.2. Sweden uses lots of shaded curtains because they get the midnight sun. Finland, 1.5. Norway, 1.5. So, I mean, you can't do a better controlled experiment than get a group of twins, and one blind and one not. So let's talk about melatonin. You guys good? I can keep going? Melatonin does a number of things. It's a very primitive hormone. In fact, amoeba make melatonin for reasons we don't know. But it's in every mammal and most reptiles. And what it does is, in terms of the immunomodulation, it stimulates T cells and B cells. Every person in this room, guarantee you, you're not the same person as you were 2 months ago. You make new cells every day, and all your cells are by 2 months have completely changed, brand new. So you renewed yourself. And to do that, you need billions of cell divisions every day. The only things that don't divide is your brain cells that you're stuck with from the moment you're born. But these new cells, if you think of all these cell divisions, Some of them are not going to divide properly, and those will be defective cells, and they'll just die because they're not functional. Some of them will be, and this is about 10 to 20 cells every day you're making. The thing that's wrong with them is the control mechanism has been damaged, and you have a cell that now just keeps dividing. What is that called? That's a cancer. Okay? And that happens every day in your body. But the T cells and B cells go around at night and find these cells, and then the monocytes come and eat them and get rid of them because they're bad cells. The body has, otherwise you would have died as an infant. All right? So this is what's important about melatonin is a stimulant for these. It's not the only thing. So there are many control systems on our immune system. But what I'm trying to point out is if you now decrease melatonin when you're sleeping, it's no stretch of the imagination to say if you diminish the immune system just by a little bit, then there's a slightly higher chance one of these bad cells will escape. That's how we get cancers from light. Not that the light causes cancer, but the modulation of the cancers by melatonin causes a problem. So here's papers on that, many papers on that. Melatonin elicits an orthostatic property in a variety of different tumor cells, mostly the hormonal cancers. Whoops. Here's another one, buffering the immune system. I'm not trying to turn this into a medical talk, but I just want you to understand this is well-established science. Don't let the lighting companies befuddle you. This is real. Melatonin, immune function and aging. Why do older people get more cancers? Because their immune system, as you age, becomes less efficient. Here's one of my favorite papers done by David Blask from Tulane. And I'm going to use this later on in other papers on humans. But he took 120 nude mice. What is a nude mouse? It's a genetically modified mouse that has actually no hair, but it'll accept transplants very easily. So he transplanted human breast cancer under the skin of 120 mice. And then they broke them up to 5 quintiles. And the mice that were put on a day-night schedule that's normal, this is the rate of the cancer growth. Then he had one group, 0.02 microwatts per centimeter. That's less than a nightlight in your room. One of those little night lights. This is the amount of light that shines in your bedroom around your shades at night from your local street light. That's how little light it is. Notice the rate of cancer increased. And for every successive increase in lighting, the rate for that group of 20 mice, the cancer grew faster and faster until he had no night at all. The cancer basically shot out of chest. That's pretty startling, is it? You can't do this kind of an experiment on humans, right? No, any here want to volunteer? So you have to do it on mice. But what you can do is do epidemiologic studies that mimic it. So there are voluminous light at night breast cancer data now. 2007, World Health Organization declared shift working, which is basically people constantly shifting in their circadian rhythms always off, as a carcinogen. That was published in Lancet. Women who sleep with light at night in the bedroom have 5 times the rate of basal cancer. On and on and on. Here's a systematic review, 17 studies. It's called a meta-analysis in medicine. And by doing that, they showed a linear relationship up to 40 nanowatts per centimeter that basically just mimicked exactly what we saw in the mice. We are mammals, after all. So here's one of the best studies, and I'm going to highlight this as an example, but there are numerous others. This is the light at night breast cancer incidence in Nurses' Health Study 2. 110,000 women were followed from 1989 to 2013. And they studied them, they just followed their health statistics, But they also broke them up into 5 quintiles, just like the mice. And the one group lived in the center city, and they had lots of light pollution, suburbs, and one group was out in the boonies. And there was a stepwise increase in breast cancer rates. Everything else being the same, smoking, health habits, everything. The only difference was the degree of light on your street corner shining in your bedroom. This is outdoor light, mind you. And they basically classified that by satellite studies on the ground. So,
What about like a small light emitting from a clock in my bedroom?
yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. The answer is any light, okay? But we can't control what people do in their bedroom other than give you good advice. There's no reason why tax dollars should be putting up things that affect your health. So if you think that's an outlier, there's 20 other good studies just like that, all the way from Israel, 2 from Israel, Connecticut, worldwide studies, South Korea. One in Spain just came out, and they had thousands of people in there, and they all show the same thing. If you go from anywhere from 14 to 18% increase in breast cancer if you live in a light polluted area and it shines in your bedroom. When you have one study, you say, that's interesting. When you have 2 studies, as a physician, you say, yeah, I should look into this. When you have 3 or more, that's important. And when you have literally hundreds now that all say the exact same thing, this is real established science. And unless you think the men in the room here get off scot-free, prostate cancer mimics that exactly. I have multiple papers on that, but I'm just putting up one. But here's a recent one, 2015. So prostate cancer goes up for the same reason, 2 to 3 times the rate. Thyroid cancer has recently been looked at from Texas, increased rate. Pancreatic cancer. The common theme here, there are other non-hormonally induced cancers, but for the most part, it seems to be the hormonally related cancers are the ones that affect the most, which makes sense since melatonin is a hormone that regulates other hormones. So, obesity. Turns out if you're light at night predicts a higher rate of developing obesity in middle to older age Americans. It increases diabetes risk if you become more obese. And again, quintile, stepwise increase, 12 to 19% increase in obesity if you have lights. It affects the lecithin and GHL hormones. Type 2 diabetes, okay? Here's 2024, just published. I have others, but this was a nice large study, and just in fact, published this month, September 12th, and in Diabetes and Metabolism Journal. And it shows if you're exposed to light at night, you have a higher rate of diabetes. But that's because your obesity rate goes up. Metabolic syndrome is another study, just recent, so I threw it in 2024. Yeah, it actually hasn't been published yet. I got a pre-print that's coming out in December 2024. And metabolic syndrome is the combination of obesity, diabetes, atherosclerotic disease. They kind of run together because they're all caused by the same thing. And this shows an increase. If you have increased obesity and increased diabetes, don't be surprised if you have an increased atherosclerotic coronary disease and carotid disease. And there it is. So, if you're in light polluted areas, you have a higher rate of coronary disease. Now, there are many other factors. I'm not saying this is the root of all evil. 40% of breast cancers come from the BRCA gene, for example. Okay, and that you just bad luck. You're born with parents who have the BRCA gene. That's 40% of all breast cancers. So light pollution involves about 15 to 17%. But still, why should we take that extra risk? Okay, so there are other factors. I'm just talking about the light pollution part of it. So Alzheimer's disease just came out, this study here, September. Did a recent PubMed search and picked out some of the best studies. 13,500 patients followed from 2012 to, they're still following them till 2028. And early results showed there's a P001 significance, a correlation between developing Alzheimer's and light pollution. That's highly significant, by the way. Now, there's only a few papers on Alzheimer's. I thought this one was a good one. Carotid atherosclerosis, risk of cerebrovascular disease, sleep. Of course, it's going to affect your sleep. And then that affects psychiatric issues and a whole bunch of other things associated with that. So I want to move on here. Possible excessive illumination on the retina. Turns out, remember that blue light I keep talking about? It damages the retina if you stare at it long enough. Doesn't happen with, it's kind of like what Einstein's, one of his miracle papers back in 2010, he discovered the photoelectric effect. And bright light that was not very intense didn't knock off the electron. But if it was the right frequency, it knocked off the electron. That's what he actually won the Nobel Prize for, not relativity. Well, the same thing happens with the retina. If you have intense blue, it damages the retina. Orange and red doesn't do that. Doesn't have enough energy. Staring at a blue light turns out is not good for you. And it causes retinal pigment loss and eventually cell death in the eye. And so macular degeneration, I thought I put a slide on, I guess I didn't, increases if you're exposed to blue light a lot. This is NGC 6781. It's an old star that blew up. So let's talk just 5 minutes on the environment, and then I'll stop for questions. Turns out humans aren't the only things affected. Plants, insects, birds, fish, everything gets affected by light at night outdoors. In fact, Travis Lancour's University of California published the paper summarizing this in 2018, January issue of 2018, and this is the last sentence in his paper. And I think it speaks for itself. I'll read it. If a lighting environmental effect on a particular species has not yet been documented, it's probably because it's not yet been studied. In every case where a study has been performed, an effect has been determined. Okay? He's been studying this for years and years. He's one of the premier researchers on the environment. And basically, every time he studies a species, he finds a bad effect from light pollution. The animals can experience orientation and disorientation. In fact, I'll give you a great example. In Las Vegas, they have that pyramid. You know that? And they have that light that goes up into the sky. You can see it from 30, 40 miles away. You know what I'm talking about? You can see it from space. They go over it. That light is so intense that birds from all around start circling around it, and they finally just die of exhaustion. So here's a little known fact if you ever go there and want to gamble in that place. Every morning they have a team to sweep up the dead birds on the sidewalk because so many birds die every single night because it attracts the birds, and they just fall dead on the pyramid and then roll down to the sidewalk. So light pollution affects mammals, fishes, birds, removes the reproductive seasonality of songbirds by a month, and then their food supply that's normally there isn't there, and they die. Fishes are affected, and I'll give you a couple of good examples of that. Plants and insects. And the light spreads far and wide. Lights that 5,000 K spread up to 50 miles away can be seen because they're so intense. Insect declines. I was at a talk a few years back, and there was an entomologist there. He speaking right before me, and the title of his talk I'll never forget. His talk was, "Why is your windshield clean?" Okay? We've managed to kill off, in the last 30 years, 40% of the world's insects. That's why you don't have to clean your windshield anymore. When I was young, I had to clean the windshield, right? Everyone did? Not anymore. They're all dead. And that's bad because insects are a food source for birds, other animals, and the entomologists, the scientists of the world are calling it an insect apocalypse right now. But does it matter? Well, you need insects to pollinate your food. Okay, if you don't have insects, you get no food, right? That's one of the reasons why raising bees is such a growth industry right now. Farmers need the bees because all the natural insects are dead. So make a lot of money bringing bees to the farmers now. Shouldn't have to be that way. Here's an example, mayflies on the Susquehanna Bridge in Pennsylvania. Actually, it's West Virginia. They only live for a few days, and they're supposed to mate, lay eggs in the water. Instead, they get attracted to this light on the bridge, create this mess, and the fish get no food. And then the next population of insects doesn't exist. Bird kills all over the country. Turtles, great example in Florida. Turtle population in Florida was going down to near zero until finally a scientist at the University of Southwest Florida figured it out. Turtles hatch at full moon, and they look for the brightest light, which is the full moon shining on the ocean, and that's where they go. If you have a bright street corner over here, instead of going to the ocean, they go this way. They never make it to the ocean, and they die. Get run over by cars, they never make it to the water. When they figured that out, many towns in Florida banned light. I mean, people buy a house in Florida, first thing you want to do is put a spotlight so they can go to sleep knowing the sand is protected. But the problem is it kills off the turtles. So they passed laws say you can't shine lights all night long, and lo and behold, turtle population's coming back. Fireflies. We used to have lots of them in Gloucester. Their population's way down, and that's because the more light pollution you have, the male and the female firefly can't find each other. That's how they communicate, is with light. If they can't find each other, you get no baby fireflies. Great example in southern Oregon here, Chinook salmon. There's this bridge, it's right near the California-Oregon border. Someone thought it would be great to put 4,000 K lights under the bridge so they can see the bridge from a distance. It's not for safety. On top where the cars are, there's no, the light's okay. It's all underneath. Okay, so who knows why, but anyways, when they put it up, LEDs were installed in 2009. This is the number of salmon they had before. This is the number after they put it up. So again, someone finally figured it out. They got them to turn these off during the salmon run. Salmon population is coming back. Sleep in free-living birds is a problem, and that affects how they mate and how they get baby birds. Birds play an important role in the food chain. We're killing them off, and light pollution is part of the problem. Now I'll end with this one. I think it's just a couple more slides, but you've heard about red tide in Florida, how it's causing a problem with the Florida beaches. A lot of that has to do with the sugar plantations along that big central lake. And they put too much phosphate and it goes into the rivers, goes into the ocean, and you have algae blooms. But here's another part of the problem. Besides that, at night, there are things that eat algae, and that's called phytoplankton. But they don't like the light at all because they get eaten when they're seen. So they live down below 200 feet in the ocean. At night, it's the greatest migration on Earth every single night. They come up top, eat algae. As soon as they see a ray of sunlight, they go back into the depths. So all along the coast, we have all these lights. Guess what? There's no phytoplankton that'll eat the algae. And even though the root cause is the sugar plantations, if there's nothing eating it, if you had something eating it, it would solve the problem. Trees. Notice this tree has leaves here and here it doesn't. This street light tells the tree that it's still early fall. Here, no light, The tree knows it's late in the fall and should shed the leaves. That creates a problem in the tree. Trees have hormones too, and trees that are stressed this way only live about 2/3 of their natural lifespan. They die because of this. Purdue University figured that out. Leaf, another study. Again, I'm just showing samples of studies just to show that this is very well studied. We, in Gloucester, I live in Bortle 4.5 sky. Here in Rockport, I think you're probably closer to 4. But, you know, I'd rather live here than here. So there are aesthetic reasons too. And here's the number of stars you can see in the sky depending on how much light pollution there is. The UN took notice and they're trying to create dark sky oases around the world where people can enjoy the night sky. I'm totally in favor of that. This is Responsible Outdoor Lighting at Night, a European initiative. I gave several talks for them, and they're on board. The Europeans, many ways, are ahead of us. And this is when I represented the AMA at this UN committee, Office for Outer Space Affairs, and we ended up, it was 5 parts of it. One part was satellite proliferation, basically to keep Elon Musk from ruining the night sky for professional astronomers. But one part of it was human health, and that's the part I was assigned, and I helped write, I was one of 5 authors within that section. But here is where you can download your own copy. It's 293 pages, and it has something like 350 references. But the UN has this sitting on a shelf, and they're trying to get, at some point when the war's all in, that this is going to be a major push. There's a number of people who worked on that worldwide. I'm there somewhere. And any physicians left in the audience? You know, right. If in next week, this will come out. It's a paper they asked me to write. October 1st is publication date, and it's ethics of light pollution. And if you read it, you can get 1 credit hour. So you get free CME if you just read my paper. What's that? In fact, I think I can share this once. I can't share it before publication date, but I'll send it to GAC, and you guys can read it if you want. And in 3.5 weeks, I'm going to New Zealand. I'm the keynote speaker for the New Zealand Starlight Conference. We have worldwide congregation of people who are interested in light pollution issues. And the best part is, I pay my way to go there, but I have access to a telescope several nights. Yes. Picture of Saturn through my scope, and I'll stop there. Any questions?
What about taking melatonin?
Yeah, should have probably put a couple of slides on that. 2-part problem. One, melatonin that you take by mouth doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. So it doesn't have that much of an effect. It has a little effect, but not much. So several studies have been done to say, will this cut down cancer? And none have been positive, probably because it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. On the other hand, in megadoses of it, certain cancer specialists treating people, when they give that along with the chemotherapy, it boosts the effectiveness of the chemotherapy. So there is an effect, but you need megadoses of it in order to get past the blood-brain barrier. And if you took that by mouth, you'd be just knocked out of sleep.
I just have a question on a lot of that research. There were some things that I really would like to very interesting.
Oh, just go on the IDA website,
The IDA,
International Dark Sky website. They have 5,000 papers. They have it all there. You can go on my website, and I have many of the papers I just showed, and that's mariomattamd.com. Okay, and you can download many of the papers I showed. But if you go to the IDA, I was on the board of the IDA 2007 through 11, and I asked them at the time, you should do a bibliography so people could download the studies. Well, they finally did it 2 years ago. And just go to the ID website. On their main webpage, it'll say search for studies, and you have access to 5,000 papers.
My question is the eye the only receptor for this that causes the problems?
Yes.
Because the study on the mice, it sounded like the naked mice, like it was coming.
No. Naked mice is that's just the type of mouse. It's a genetically modified mouse. In addition to allowing transplants, they lost their hair, but it's through the eye.
So if you wear an eye mask at night,
You're protected, yeah.
protected.
But why should you have to do that?
No, you shouldn't. I'm just,
Yeah, no. I mean,
if you can't conquer the world.
your city shouldn't be putting lights on that shine in your bedroom. They should be shielded, and the type of light shouldn't be high blue, so it won't damage you. That's what I would demand. This is really one of the easiest things in the world to conquer. Okay? Shield the lights, don't overlight, and don't use blue lights. Problem solved. All these things go away. It's not that difficult. But someone else back there had a... Yeah, go ahead.
How does one start an effort in your own city to be able to have them change the lights?
Just go to town councils. See, they have usually meetings once a month, bring it up as an issue. Most town councils will listen to a citizen, and then you can bring in experts to talk about it. Just make sure they hire the right ones. Just basically go to town councils, they'll make it pass yourself, just say this is something I'm interested in, and get them to adopt. Many cities are switching anyways to LEDs. So basically you got to tell them the following facts. One, it won't cost you not 1 penny more to put in the good lights rather than the bad lights. They cost the same. You'll actually save money because they're more energy efficient, almost always going long term, and you won't have to replace them when enough people complain if you put up the wrong lights. So it's a win-win-win all around.
The relationship we're talking about, external, but we're all getting LED lights now in
Yeah.
the house. Which is better for, just your eyes in general?
Okay, so indoors, these are probably, they look like about 2,700. In an office environment in the daytime, you want the stimulation in blue to wake you up, okay? So in an office atmosphere, 3,500, 4,000 is okay. But at night in your house, let me put it a different way. Why do you have shades on your light, right? Because a direct light is bad for you. You can't see well. So indoor light should be around 2,200 to 2,500, and that's pretty much what most indoor lights are, because no one would put up, if you put up a 4,000 K light in your house, you'd immediately put a hammer to it. It's horrible, it's harsh, it's not something you want to live with. And so the lights that they sell for indoors almost always are in the right range, but most packaging now says what they are. They'll say CCT. I wish they get rid of it. This is basically hot iron pokers, but this is what we're stuck with. So they'll say 2,200 up to 2,500. From incandescent to LEDs, it's about a 8-to-1, and from halogens, which are the other ones that were being used, it's about a 4-to-1 ratio. So basically, this is the mistake a lot of people make. They think, well, who'd want a 6-watt light bulb? I mean, geez. That 6-watt light bulb is putting out more than the 100-watt incandescent bulb. So there's an equivalent. So you don't want to put up a 25-watt LED in your room. It'll be like the surface of the sun.
Mario, just a note for everybody, when you get me that paper of yours, what, a couple of weeks?
Yeah, sometime in early October.
It's going to be available on the GAC website, gaac.us, or just Google astronomy in Gloucester and you get us. It'll be on our blog. Get it in a couple of weeks and you'll be able to read
I got 10 credit hours for writing it. I'm good for the rest of the year.
I read somewhere that LEDs were put in place to save energy, but
Yes.
now that they're so cheap to operate, we have more LED lights and we're wasting more energy than we did before.
That is true. That is an absolutely true statement, and the reason is following. So you're going from lights that used to be 60 to 100 watts down to 8 to 12 watts, right? You're saving an enormous amount of energy. So the typical business says, well, geez, it's so much cheaper, I'll put up 10 more lights. That's the problem. The human reaction to saving money is this, you can now waste more. Okay, that's, I don't know what to do about that. Education.
All right, thank you, Mario.